A powerful black lawyer gets detained at the airport, but what they didn't know changes everything. Olivia Bennett, a high-profile attorney, is stopped at customs, accused of carrying a fraudulent passport. As officials move to deport her to a country she's never even visited, she realizes this is no mistake, but it's part of a secret citizenship purge. With time running out, a lone officer risks everything to uncover the truth. Olivia Bennett strode through the terminal, rolling her suitcase behind her. The week in Greece had been a perfect escape. Long walks by the sea, food that lingered on her tongue, and silence where no one needed her to argue a case or make a decision. Now, she was back, recharged, ready for routine. As she approached the customs checkpoint, she reached in her bag, fingers brushing over her passport. A simple formality, a few minutes of small talk, and she would be on her way home. The officer at the booth glanced at the approaching line, his expression unreadable. "Next," he called. Olivia stepped forward, placing her passport in the officer's waiting hand. The man was older, neatly pressed uniform, graying hair trimmed short. His name tag read T. Grayson. Grayson flipped through the pages, eyes narrowing as he studied the details. His thumb pressed against the ID page, the corner of his mouth tightening. Purpose of travel. Vacation. How long? 10 days. Grayson's gaze lifted. His inspection of her face felt more intense than necessary. His fingers tapped against the passport before he leaned closer to the screen. A moment passed, then another. The line behind her grew, impatient shifts of weight and size of travelers eager to be done. Olivia waited. "You say this is your passport?" he asked, lifting it slightly. She frowned. "It is my passport." Grayson didn't react. He turned it over, bringing it closer to the scanner, letting the machine process the information. The screen blinked, and a brief beep sounded, but his frown deepened. "Step aside for a moment," he instructed. Her grip tightened around her suitcase handle. "Why?" "I need to verify something." Olivia glanced around. Other passengers walked past without issue. A woman in a business suit, a man in sweats carrying duty-free bags, a family juggling 2 toddlers. Yet she stood here, under scrutiny. She took a breath. "I have a driver's license and bar ID, if you need additional proof." Grayson didn't acknowledge the offer. Instead, he motioned to a uniformed officer nearby. The other man stepped forward, eyes flicking between them. Olivia exhaled through her nose, keeping her tone level. "What exactly is the issue?" Grayson kept his gaze on the passport. "It doesn't look right." Her lips parted slightly. "What does that mean?" "It's not scanning the way it should." That was vague, deliberately so. Olivia reached for her bag, pulling out her driver's license and placing it on the counter. "This proves I am who I say I am." Grayson barely glanced at it before looking over at the second officer. "Take her to secondary." A murmur passed through the line. Olivia felt the shift in attention, the weight of eyes pressing in. She straightened. "You can check my credentials right here." Grayson shook his head. "Step to the side, ma'am." The second officer gestured toward a door past the checkpoint. Olivia hesitated. This wasn't happening. It couldn't be. Her phone was in her pocket. She could call someone, her assistant, her firm, anyone. But that would mean acknowledging this wasn't a simple misunderstanding, and she wasn't ready to do that. She picked up her license and slipped it back into her bag. "I want to know exactly why I'm being sent for additional screening." Grayson's face remained neutral. Standard procedure. The words fell hollow, but refusing would only escalate things. Olivia lifted her chin, pushed her suitcase forward, and followed the officer through the door. The room was small, the walls a dull shade of gray. A metal chair scraped the floor as Olivia sat, her suitcase pushed against the table. Grayson entered without a word, setting her passport on the table between them. He sat across from her, hands folded neatly. "Let's go over this again," he said. "Where were you born?" "Chicago," Olivia answered, meeting his stare. "Illinois, United States." Grayson flipped the passport open again. "And yet, something about this doesn't add up." She folded her arms. "Because..." He tapped a finger against the document. "Records show discrepancies in your travel history. Stamps from places that don't match the federal database." She blinked. "That's impossible." "Is it?" Olivia clenched her hands beneath the table. "I'm a lawyer. I know my rights. You're detaining me without cause. You're not under arrest." Grayson replied smoothly. Yet, she inhaled sharply. Then I'd like to contact my attorney. Denied. Her jaw tensed. That's a violation of my rights. He leaned forward slightly. Let's get something straight, Ms. Bennett. Until we can confirm your identity, you don't have rights in this room. Olivia's pulse quickened, but she forced herself to remain calm. This was more than a simple delay. Something was happening, something intentional. Time blurred. The walls of the room seemed closer now, the air thick. Olivia's watch had been taken along with her phone. Her suitcase gone. She had no way of knowing how long she had been sitting there. Hours? Longer? She heard voices beyond the door. Low, quick exchanges between officers. Her name wasn't spoken, but one phrase stood out. Crackdown on undocumented cases. The word sent a ripple through her thoughts. She sat up straighter, pressing her hands against the cold table. What did that mean? Who exactly were they targeting? The door opened again, and a new officer stepped in, his uniform just as crisp, but his expression unreadable. Olivia steeled herself, hoping for reason, a resolution. Instead, he slid a sheet of paper onto the table. There is no record of your citizenship. She laughed once, but the sound died quickly. That's ridiculous. Your passport is flagged as fraudulent, he continued. And based on the information available, you are to be deported immediately. To where? Olivia demanded. The officer exhaled through his nose. Ghana. A silence settled in the room, heavy and unrelenting. Olivia's stomach lurched. I've never been to Ghana, she said, each word sharp, deliberate. The officer said nothing, but Olivia saw it in his eyes. This wasn't a mistake. This was happening. Olivia's breath felt shallow, her hands pressing into the cold metal table. The air in the room was thick with an unspoken threat, and Grayson's smirk only fueled the fire rising inside her. She had spent her life fighting for justice, for people caught in impossible situations, and now she was the one trapped. But she wouldn't be silent. Listen to me, she said, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. I can prove who I am. I graduated from Northwestern Law. I clerked for Judge Harmon. I've argued cases in federal court. You can check my bar registration, my social security number, my tax records. Grayson leaned against the wall, arms crossed, amusement flickering in his gaze. Frauds always have a good story, he said. Olivia bit back a retort, her heart hammering against her ribs. She turned to Officer Cole, who was still at the door, his stance less rigid than the others. He had hesitated when she spoke, a flicker of something in his eyes that looked dangerously close to doubt. She latched onto that. Officer Cole, she said, her voice sharp with urgency. Please, look me up in the system. You'll see my law license is active. My records are clean. There has to be a mistake here. Cole shifted his weight, his eyes moving from Olivia to the file on the table, then back to Grayson. His jaw worked, as if grinding over an unspoken thought. You don't have authority to run searches, Grayson muttered, his gaze narrowing at Cole. I can verify bar registrations, Cole said, his voice careful. It's public record. For the first time since she had been dragged into this room, Olivia felt a sliver of hope. She watched as Cole turned to the computer, typing swiftly. The silence stretched, the sound of keys the only thing breaking the tension. Grayson pushed off the wall and stepped toward the desk. Don't waste your time, Cole. This is a done deal. No, it isn't, Olivia shot back, anger lacing her words. You're making an accusation that could destroy my life, and you haven't even bothered to confirm basic facts? Grayson's eyes darkened. Your records don't match. That's enough. Cole's fingers paused over the keyboard. He glanced back at Olivia. What's your full name, exactly as it appears on your legal documents? She exhaled slowly. Olivia Marie Bennett. Cole's brow furrowed as he continued typing. Seconds passed, then a minute. Olivia could feel her pulse in her throat. Then, Cole's eyes flicked toward the screen, his face tightening. Something's wrong, he muttered. Olivia's breath caught. What? Cole leaned closer, scanning the data in front of him. Her bar registration. It's there. Active. Tied to her social security number. Grayson scoffed. So? Doesn't mean the passport isn't fake. Cole's fingers moved again. Hold on. I'm cross-checking federal databases. His voice became more clipped, focused. Olivia saw the tension in his shoulders as he worked. Grayson's smirk faltered. Cole, Wait, Cole said sharply. His eyes flicked over the screen. He sat back, exhaling slowly. This isn't right. Olivia's stomach nodded. What do you mean? Cole turned toward her fully. Your name appears in multiple systems. Law records, tax filings, government registrations. Everything checks out. But he hesitated, then met her gaze. There's also a duplicate record, one that says you don't exist. Olivia's fingers dug into the table. What? Cole looked back at the screen. It looks like someone flagged your citizenship record as voided. Grayson's jaw tensed. That's not possible. Olivia felt heat rising to her face. And yet, here we are. Cole glanced at Grayson. She's not lying. Her credentials are solid. Grayson exhaled sharply through his nose. Then why is her passport invalid? Olivia forced herself to stay calm. Someone did this intentionally. That means it can be undone. Cole gave a slow nod. I'll escalate this. I need to speak to my supervisor. Grayson stepped in front of him. No. We process deportation orders based on official records. That's the procedure. Cole stared him down. Not when the record is wrong. Grayson's expression darkened, but he said nothing. The power struggle was obvious. Olivia's heart pounded. Cole was her only chance, and Grayson knew it. The young officer turned back to Olivia. You'll stay here while I escalate this. Grayson's voice was ice. You better be sure about this, Cole. Cole's jaw tightened, but he didn't respond. Instead, he turned and left the room, the door clicking shut behind him. Silence hung thick in the air. Grayson lingered, his stare heavy. Olivia didn't look away. If he expected her to cower, he was mistaken. Finally, he leaned in just slightly. You're making this harder on yourself. Olivia arched a brow. I'm making this right. Grayson's lips pressed together, his jaw twitching once before he straightened and left the room. Olivia sat still, staring at the door long after Grayson left. The weight of his words lingered, pressing down on her chest. She wasn't sure how much time had passed when she heard muffled voices outside. Then the door opened again, and Officer Cole stepped back in, his expression unreadable. Good news? Olivia asked, forcing calm into her voice. Cole hesitated, then exhaled. Not exactly. Olivia's fingers curled around the edges of the table. What does that mean? Cole glanced at the door before stepping closer, lowering his voice. There's a flag on your record. Not just your passport, but your entire citizenship status. It was changed recently. She frowned. Changed? By whom? Cole shook his head. The system won't show that level of detail, but I have a feeling I know who's behind it. Olivia's mind whirled. Who had that kind of power? Who wanted her erased? Then it hit her like a punch to the gut. A case. A lawsuit she had worked on months ago. She had represented a coalition challenging a secretive citizenship purge, one that disproportionately targeted Black Americans. A whistleblower had come forward with evidence that government officials had been quietly revoking citizenship statuses, marking legitimate Americans as undocumented. And now it was happening to her. Her blood ran cold. Grayson, she whispered. Cole's gaze sharpened. What about him? She swallowed, trying to push past the rising panic. He was involved in that case. The evidence we found, it exposed corruption in Homeland Security. People like him were covering it up. Cole's face darkened. And now he's using the system to get rid of you. Olivia nodded slowly. He saw an opportunity. If I disappear, I can't fight back. Cole was silent for a moment. Then he cursed under his breath. This goes deeper than I thought. He turned to the computer, his fingers moving quickly. Olivia couldn't see what he was doing, but she saw the tension in his jaw. After a long pause, he looked at her again. I found something. There's an internal directive. Unofficial, but real. It's flagging Black travelers at international borders for citizenship verification. Olivia's stomach clenched. How many people has this happened to? Cole's eyes flickered with something close to rage. Too many. She leaned forward. You have to expose this. He hesitated. I can report it internally, but if they're covering it up at high levels, you need to go outside the system, Olivia pressed. I have a friend, Amber Johnson. She's a journalist with The Guardian. She can get this out before it's buried. Cole's hesitation only lasted a moment before he pulled out his phone. He stepped toward the door, checking the hallway before dialing. Olivia listened as he spoke quickly, his voice low. Amber Johnson, this is Officer Xavier Cole. I'm with U.S. Customs. I have something you need to see. A beat of silence. Then Olivia could hear Amber's voice faintly on the other end. Cole glanced at Olivia. Yeah, he said into the phone. It's about Olivia Bennett. Another pause. Then he nodded. Meet me in 30 minutes. I'll send the location. He hung up and looked at Olivia. We have to move fast. The urgency in his tone made her stomach twist. What happens now? Cole's expression was grim. They're processing your deportation papers as we speak. Olivia pushed back from the table, her heart pounding. Then we don't have much time. Cole nodded. We need to stall them. If we can delay long enough for Amber to publish the story, they won't be able to make you disappear. The door opened suddenly, and both of them turned. Grayson stood there, his smirk replaced with something colder. More calculating. Time's up, he said. We're moving you. Cole straightened. On whose orders? Grayson's eyes flicked to Olivia before settling on Cole. Orders from above. This is done. Cole squared his shoulders. She has the right to appeal. Grayson laughed, but there was no humor in it. And where do you think that appeal is going to go? Olivia's pulse raced, but she forced her voice to stay even. You're making a mistake, Grayson. He leaned in just slightly. No, Bennett. You did. When you thought you could take me down and get away with it. Cole stepped in front of Olivia, blocking Grayson's path. You're violating her rights. Grayson's eyes flickered with something dangerous. Watch yourself, Cole. Cole didn't move. She's not going anywhere. The room was charged with tension, and Olivia knew they were running out of time. She needed that article to break. Needed the world to know what was happening before she was put on a plane to a country she had never even set foot in. The corridor outside the holding room buzzed with movement. Olivia could hear footsteps, the rustling of paperwork, the low hum of voices discussing logistics. Every passing second brought her closer to being forced onto a plane, sent to a country she had never set foot in. Grayson stood near the doorway, tapping his fingers against the frame. His eyes gleamed with quiet satisfaction. It's over, Bennett. You should have known when to back down. Cole didn't move. His stance was firm, unyielding. She's not going anywhere. Grayson smirked. She doesn't have a choice. Olivia's heart pounded, but she refused to let fear overtake her. She focused on Cole. Any word from Amber? Cole's phone vibrated in his pocket. He glanced at it, eyes narrowing. Then his expression shifted. It's out. The article is live. Grayson's smirk faltered. What? Cole tapped the screen a few times, then held it up. Amber just leaked the whole operation. The citizenship purges, the wrongful detainments, and your direct involvement in covering it up. It's already trending. Grayson lunged forward and snatched the phone from Cole's hand. His eyes scanned the article, his face draining of color. Olivia could see the headline over his shoulder. Exclusive. Government purge targeting black travelers exposed. A new voice entered the conversation. What's going on here? A senior officer had appeared at the end of the hall, his sharp gaze sweeping over the scene. Behind him, more officials were arriving, some from airport security, others from internal affairs. Grayson straightened, shoving Cole's phone back at him. There's been a misunderstanding, Grayson said quickly. We were following protocol. Cole cut him off. No, you weren't. You falsified information to detain a U.S. citizen. You altered her records. You abused your authority. And now the entire country knows about it. The senior officer's expression darkened. Is this true? Olivia met his gaze. Check the records. Check my passport, my tax filings, my law license. Everything is valid. Grayson knew that. He's been trying to silence me. Grayson's jaw tensed. She's lying. The system flagged her. Because you flag her, Cole shot back. You try to disappear her, just like you've done to others. The senior officer's radio crackled. Sir, a voice came through. We're receiving calls from multiple media outlets. They want statements on the citizenship purge allegations. What should we tell them? A long silence stretched between them. Then the senior officer turned to Grayson. You, step into my office. Now. Grayson clenched his jaw. Sir, with all due respect. Now. The officer's voice brooked no argument. Two agents moved forward, escorting Grayson down the hallway. His face twisted with rage, but he said nothing. Olivia exhaled slowly. The weight pressing on her chest finally eased. Cole turned to her, a small smile tugging at the corner of his lips. Looks like you're not going anywhere. She let out a shaky laugh. Thank you for believing me. Cole nodded. Someone had to do the right thing. The senior officer gestured toward Olivia's confiscated belongings. Ms. Bennett, you're free to go. Your documents are being reinstated. We sincerely apologize for this egregious mistake. Olivia picked up her passport, tracing her fingers over the embossed cover. It felt heavier now, more significant. I'm going to make sure this never happens to anyone else. Cole smirked. Something tells me you will. She walked out of the airport into the warm night air, inhaling deeply. The city lights stretched before her, pulsing with life. Her home, finally, undeniably hers.